Let's get right to our panel. Here in the studio is Richard Thornton, a professor of history and international affairs at George Washington University. From Beijing, Victor Gao is a Chinese international relations expert. Paul Hockenos is a freelance writer and author of several books on European politics. He joins us from Berlin. And from Dallas, Kevin Casas is the former second vice president of Costa Rica and a distinguished scholar at the University of Texas. Welcome to all of you. Richard, let me start with you. Let's talk about Donald Trump's foreign policy. It's been called all kinds of things: isolationist, unilateral, national chauvinism. But do you see a central doctrine to his foreign policy?
We don't see it yet, but it's imminent. He represents a change in American strategy. For the previous 40 years, the United States has pursued a strategy of what I would call détente and withdrawal. But we've done it from a position of relative weakness. What Trump is doing now is trying to change that strategy from withdrawal to standing fast, and doing it from a position of strength. In the next 2 weeks, we'll see the President and his Secretary of State traveling to the Far East and to South Asia. The President will go to Tokyo, Seoul, Beijing, Hanoi, and Manila. Tillerson will go to South Asia. And I believe we will see the beginning of a framework for the President's foreign policy emerge as a result of these trips.
How can he be doing it from a position of strength if he is pulling out of various engagements that the United States is involved in?
It's important to understand it as one step backward and 2 steps forward. The pulling out of TPP, for example, was, I think, a smart thing, because the original impetus behind TPP was to kind of contain Beijing. So by walking away from TPP and moving toward a new framework, which potentially could include Beijing, I think is a positive step. Rather than a negative containment, we're looking at positive inclusion. But of course, that depends on President Xi. By all accounts, President Xi is going to emerge from this party Congress in a position where he can deliver. And when Trump goes to Beijing, I think they'll be able to talk from a position of some strength.
Okay, let me go to Paul in Berlin. Paul, President Trump has been very critical of the NATO alliance. He's also threatened to unilaterally pull out of the Iran nuclear deal. And we know that the United Kingdom, France, Germany, 3 major European countries, are also signatories to that deal. How does Europe see these changes?
Well, I mean, a lot of things really haven't happened yet. They've been talked about. He hasn't pulled out of the Iran deal, and he hasn't pulled out of NATO. And although he's asked the Europeans to increase their military budgets, they haven't really, and then not much has seemed to happen. So it's really with confusion and bafflement, disbelief and incredulity that the Europeans are watching and waiting for Trump to finally signify what his policy towards Europe and what the transatlantic partnership means to him.
Victor, I want to get back to the points that Dick Thornton just raised here in the studio, and that is Trump is putting himself in a place where he can relate to the rest of the world from a position of strength. And the example that was cited was the fact that the United States has pulled out of the TPP negotiations, so it can negotiate something better that would include Beijing.
I tend to disagree from this analysis. I think President Donald Trump is bringing to the U.S. diplomacy a very personal and idiosyncratic way or perception to the U.S. diplomacy. What President Donald Trump stands for may or may not represent the fundamental interest of the United States at all. And talking about repositioning the United States from a position of strength, weakening the global leadership of the United States in front of its allies and in front of other major stakeholders is not building up American strength. And I think President Donald Trump has really weakened the global perception of what exactly is the United States in its position on the global stage, whether it is trustworthy, dependable, reliable, for example, and whether the United States really means what it says and says what it means is now becoming very, very questionable. And for the top dog in the world to be in a position of not commanding immediate respect from its allies and from its partners and from its foes in the world is a dangerous step for the United States and also very dangerous for the rest of the world. Therefore, I think while China deals with President Donald Trump as what American president deserves and is waiting to give him the highest level of reception during his upcoming state visit to China on November the 8th, I would say we could not afford to really equate what President Donald Trump stands for in his very idiosyncratic way of doing diplomacy with what exactly is for the United States' fundamental national interest.
Okay, let's go to Kevin. Kevin, President Trump has also threatened he's asked for a comprehensive review of the NAFTA agreement. That's a very important agreement in North America. But he's also threatened to pull out if he doesn't get what he wants. What kind of impact will that have? And how do countries like Mexico and Canada then look to the United States?
I think the effect of that would be toxic in so many different ways. I mean, not even the effect on the U.S. economy to begin with would be toxic, but the fallout from that kind of measure, withdrawing from NAFTA, would be much broader than that. I think it would be felt across the Americas in a very acute way. I think for the most part, Latin American countries so far have watched the Trump presidency with a sense, and I'm going to use the same word that a previous panelist used, with a sense of bafflement, of a sense of that you don't know what to expect. But a withdrawal from NAFTA is something that would rattle a lot of people in Latin America. Bear in mind that the U.S. has free trade agreements with a number of partners in Latin America, and I can say with direct knowledge that just to mention one example, I mean, policymakers in Central America are very anxious about the fate of NAFTA because CAFTA might follow next.
Dick Thornton, what is your view on that? Is it a case of the unpredictability of the Trump administration that's unnerving a lot of people around the world?
When you enter into a negotiation, such as NAFTA, you can't start the negotiation by running to the conclusion and saying, this is what we want. We need to establish opening positions, bargaining positions, and you go from there. So to say that we need to renegotiate NAFTA is not a radical idea. In fact, both the Canadians and the Mexicans understand full well that it needs to be renegotiated. Time has passed that original agreement by. It has not accounted for innovation. When NAFTA was created, we didn't even have cell phones for all intents and purposes. So a lot of that has to be renegotiated.
Isn't the president saying here, he's also saying, if I don't get what I want, then I'm going to blow this whole deal up?
Yeah, but he's not going to do that. I don't think it's too important. Yeah. Everybody recognizes the importance of NAFTA for the United States as well as for our other partners.
All right, let me go to Paul. Paul, you wanted to say something. I was saying that it's the unpredictability of Donald Trump that really makes foreign leaders very nervous.
Well, this is definitely the case in Europe. And because of it, and because of the erratic nature of his behavior and what he said, it started a discussion in Europe, and perhaps one that's overdue, about its relationship these days to the United States and the state of the transatlantic relationship and how much it's reliant on the United States for foreign policy. I mean, it's not new that the United States has been slowly withdrawing or showing less interest in Europe. Also under the Obama administration, he was much less involved in European affairs. When it came to the war in the Ukraine, for example, and with Russia, he backed off. He let Merkel and the Europeans take it. And in general, the United States is just simply not as involved. And so there are two camps here in Europe. There are those who think that they have to maintain the relationship with the United States, that it's been key to the whole post-war regime that's brought prosperity and long-lasting peace to Europe, and that this is just a phase that the United States is going through, and that in 3 years there'll be somebody else in the White House who they can deal with. And then there are others who think differently. They say, you know, we haven't had a really strong partner in the United States in a long time. You know, there was agreement more or less with Obama on a lot of issues, but with George W. Bush not, if you'll remember. There was quite a lot of discontent and some very rough patches there. And this is a time when certain Europeans are saying, okay, you know, we're going to be going it alone, or we might already be going it alone because we don't know exactly what's happening with Trump. So we have to establish defense and other mechanisms to deal with foreign affairs, and we have to step up and do it. There's no way that Europe can play the role that the United States did once. It can't be a superpower like the United States,
right.
But it could go about things differently and take the lead differently in terms of, you know, diplomacy and negotiation and
right.
aid. And so this is where the discussion is right now.